Okay, let's get into it. No word of a lie, these plants were planted at the exact same time. They are both beefsteak tomatoes, and they obviously, very obviously, have different growth rates. And this is not clickbait, this is legitimate. To drive this point home even further, I'm gonna grab another tomato variety that I've done the same thing with. Okay, these are Brandywines. Brandywine Exhibit A, Brandywine Exhibit B, again planted at the same time. And why these are not in containers actually will make sense here just in a little bit. But again, same plant, same time, very drastically different growth. This one has 4 leaves more than this one. And this rule doesn't just apply to tomatoes, it actually applies to all plants. Now obviously this is more than one marigold. This is a marigold, and I was planted at the same time as these ones, and even my smallest ones are drastically larger than this one. So what the heck am I doing? That's what we're going to talk about here today. Okay, so I've always been known as the person that starts their seeds last, but always has the biggest, healthiest plants going into the garden. And it is because I've hacked the system to an extent. I have used these methods for years. A lot of them, most of them, are passed down to me from my grandma, who gardened her entire life. And to be honest, I just followed those methods blind until I got a degree in plant science, soil science world. And then I started realizing, there's some science behind why my grandma was doing what she was doing, even though she wasn't a formally educated plant scientist. Which, for the record, means absolutely nothing. Most of us shouldn't have even been let out of the university. Ultimately, she was her own garden scientist, and she found out how to grow plants very, very quickly. So my mother-in-law actually came into my greenhouse this weekend, and she was helping me pot up plants because, whoo-wee, your girl's got a lot of plants. And the first thing she said when she walked in the greenhouse was, "You planted all these seeds like 3 weeks ago. I was here when you did it. What happened?" And I have to apologize. I would not be this close to the camera, but it is raining outside and it is really, really cold at the same time. So I need to put my head in front of it. It's like a halo. Wolf in sheep's clothing, a ginger with a halo. That's not real. So the reason we know that some of these methods can be backed up by science is because whenever there's a little bit of Skrilla involved, there's money behind research. And most of these methods are utilized by massive greenhouses, and most of them being in the world of cut flowers or the plants that you buy from the store as bedding plants, all the way to tomatoes and produce that obviously need to be harvested. And the reason for that is because not only do they need to have a rapid turnaround to get the most money out of that space, but they also are highly motivated to ensure that they get the best quality. So they put a lot of money and research into most of these methodologies. So number one is temperature. Now, this is so important. If there was one thing I would focus on, it would be temperature. So number one is actually increasing both your daytime and your nighttime temps, meaning you're elevating your average. For us in Canada, Americans, I'm sure your homes are around the same. We do 21 degrees Celsius. I think you guys are like 74 degrees Fahrenheit. And then in the greenhouse, we usually want to go above that. There's a little bit more science that I use here, and that is called a temperature differential. Now, before you click off, I promise you, I actually make this very digestible. You can ask the geek crew down below. This is not hard stuff. I give you little baby bites. They've looked at control temps, and the control temp during the day is 20 degrees Celsius, nighttime temp being 25, or vice versa. The high temp that they reference in this one in particular, and I will link this study in the show notes below if I forget, please let me know. I am working like 7 days a week, almost like 16-hour days. You can ask people on the Patreon. I'm editing videos like 1:30 right now. working in agriculture and having a YouTube channel that's dedicated to plants was a bad choice. And then high temps are referencing either 30 degrees Celsius in the day or night, and then the opposite being 25 degrees Celsius. A positive differential means that your night times are hotter than your daytimes. A negative differential is when your daytime is hotter than your nighttime, and that is important. So right out of the gate, we know that our high temps, the 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, negative or positive diff, actually gives you better stem elongation, which in the world of cut flowers is a good thing. In the world of maybe tomatoes, you might not want that. In this case, they did use tomatoes, and I'll kind of link what they ended up looking like. But they ended up with stem elongation, stem thickness increased in the high temperature ranges versus the controls, so a much thicker stem. And then the last thing they looked at was called vascular development. And vascular development is essentially the organelles inside of a plant stem being thicker, and those organelles move water and nutrients up and down through the plant, which obviously aids in growth and that sort of thing. So that is actually pretty important. And that is something that we can't see visually all the time. Like thicker stem sometimes means that, but not always. And so the measurement for that was actually like a very thin cut put under a microscope and kind of dyed and tinged. That's how they looked at it. And again, the high temps won out on this. They, blew the control temps out of the water. Out of the high temps, which version, is it your nighttime at 30 or your daytime at 30, that caused the greatest result, if you will? Well, it was the positive diff version of this that created the best results. And by best results, I'm referencing stem elongation. I'm referencing the thickness of the stem, and then also the vascular development. So how do I control that? Well, you probably can hear it because I'm assuming my mic's picking up on it, but I have a heater in here, and then on this heater I actually have it plugged into a heating, cooling, temperature thingamajigger. I know, I don't even know what it's called, but someone here on the channel suggested it, and I'm in love with this thing. So I got mine off Amazon. I'll link it down below, but it is a temperature panel. It has a probe that you can place anywhere in here, and I just place it dead center in the middle height of the entire greenhouse. And then inside of that, there's two plugins, one plugin for heating, one plugin for cooling, and I set my differentials. So I literally set what I want my minimum temperature to be, what I want my maximum temperature to be, and how quickly I want it to change. So do I want it to change within half a degree centigrade, or do I want it to change within a degree of centigrade? And it actually does do Fahrenheit, because I was very confused at first. I couldn't figure out how to switch it, but eventually I did. And that is what I utilize to make sure that my temps are kind of hitting the differential that I'm looking for. Now, I can double check this despite the fact that I've been monitoring this little thing like a crazy person, because I didn't trust it. I don't trust technology all the time, but you can use an analog version of this. So the analog version of this is the min-max thermometer. I've talked about this thing so many times because I love this. It's tried and true. So the black hand is a live hand, and the blue hand and the red hand are dead hands, if you will. The black one kind of moves around and it bumps it either higher and lower. You can see my max is 30 and my minimum is around 23-ish. I'm heading into the nighttime right now, and my temperature is at a 27. So it is changing to what I need it to change to. Now the other option, and this one actually saved my butt, and that is this, the Earth One sensor. So I helped develop this. You don't need this, but I did have my app set to alert me as to when my temperatures were getting too low, or if my light was on too long. It measures literally freaking everything, but I particularly had it set for my temps. And I actually forgot to plug my heater in, or I had unplugged it because I was like moving stuff around. I forgot to plug it in. I'm sitting in bed at like 12 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden my app goes off and I look and my temperatures were beginning to plummet. Well, that literally saved an entire greenhouse of produce and flowers and everything else. So that is another option, is the Earth One sensor. But that one does need an app and that sort of thing. So if you're not into tech, then that's probably not for you. If you are into tech, it is. I'm not trying to sell you on it. It's just, that is what I use. Okay, so that is temperature. The next one is light. In particular, your DLI. So DLI simply stands for daylight integral, and daylight integral is the intensity and the duration of the light that you have it within a 24-hour period. So obviously greenhouses have some downfalls. You have plants stacked on top of plants, so your lower plants aren't always going to get a really high level of light. You have, you know, if the sun's only coming in from one side, you have that to contend with. So the first and foremost obvious thing to do is to rotate your plants around. And I do that all the time. So what I do is I actually will stand on the edge of the row, I guess, and I'll look down and I will see if there's anything leaning. It doesn't matter which way it's leaning. It can lean in, it can lean out, lean forward. If I notice that they're getting pulled out and they're getting placed somewhere else, and I do that kind of on every single layer. I do it on every single level, and I try to figure out where everyone's leaning to, and then I rotate them. Now the other one is Canadians and people who live in northern spaces, northern US. We don't have light in the same capacity that everyone else does. There are some areas even that are just more cloudy, and they don't have the light that, you know, other places do. So supplemental light, I know it sounds so weird, but supplemental light is very real. And if you were to walk into a professional greenhouse, I'm not talking like your nurseries where you buy your plants, but if you were to walk in a research greenhouse, the research greenhouses I've worked in all have light. So that actually is why I have this lighting in here. You can see outside it's very dreary at the moment, and that is because it's cloudy and rainy, and I'm still getting my DLI in because I do have my lights on. And the important thing here is actually to make sure that they get shut off. So my lights are on a timer, and the timer is 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And I am so meticulous about this that I will actually just review the wake up time for the sun in my area every 2 weeks-ish in the springtime to make sure that I am adjusting my timer so that the lights turn on at the exact same time the sun is beginning to rise, because the rest period is important. So essentially the nighttime, or the lights off, it produces something called phytochrome, and phytochrome regulates so many things within your plants. Everything from seed germination to photoperiodism, whether or not something's gonna flower, set seeds, you name it. So it's very important that your plants get nighttime. And I actually had someone tag me over on Instagram asking, what do I do about this street light over top of my garden? Because my garden never gets dark at night. And she recognized the fact that that was odd. And there are people out there that do believe that light pollution, is what we call that, does harm plants. It actually lowers the amount of phytochrome that can be produced within a plant. So the one that I was actually reading while I was researching for this video, and I just stumbled upon it, it was like a little blurb on it, is made by the the Calgary Astronomy Society of Canada. I don't know if that's actually what it's called. I will put it here. But they actually kind of went through all the different aspects of light pollution and that sort of thing and how it affects plants, and they, you know, it's kind of like a little cool paper, but it is important. Your night times are just as important as your daytimes, and the lengths of your daytimes and the lengths of your night times are important as well. The next focus for me is called VPD. Again, before you leave, I'll make this very simple. It's called vapor pressure deficit, and essentially VPD affects how water and nutrients move through a plant. So the lower your VPD is, the less nutrient it uptakes, the more water that ends up being left in the pot, which can cause root rot, because you want a continually flowing system. So you always want your plants to be uptaking water and respiring it, letting out. You want a big old circle happening. If you have water going in too quick compared to what's coming out based on your VPD, you can run into troubles. Now, the sensor does actually calculate the VP, but, and by the way, this does need Wi-Fi, and this is right against my house, so this one actually does get Wi-Fi in here. Just keep that in mind. If you don't have a sensor, you would need your min-max thermometer, and then you would need a hydrometer. So that is kind of what I do look at there, is what range I want to hit. Right now I'm trying to hit vegetative, so that is the range that I want to keep my VPD in. The next one is fertilizer. So this one is like, oh my gosh. There's a million different ways to do this. This is how I do it. I don't care how you do it, to be honest, because people will fight me in the comments on this, which is totally fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So what I do is I use liquid only. I do not put anything into these containers. These are just Sunshine Mix number 4 is all I use. I almost said 5. I put 7 in the front yard. These are Sunshine Mix number 4. It's a really nice, quick draining jumbo kind of perlite mix. I use it in all of them. All tomatoes, flowers, everything has that in it. Then I use a liquid fertilizer. So I don't mix any granular in whatsoever. And the liquid I use is until I put them outside. Once I put them outside, I actually increase my nitrogen. But for right now, I actually use the Pro Mix. It's a 5-15-5. We all know nitrogen causes a lot of vegetative growth, and if you are going for greens, if you're doing like grasses and house plants, that sort of thing, you probably want to go with more nitrogen. In the case for me, I'm not aiming for greens. I'm actually aiming for fruits and flowers and that sort of thing. And not that this is going to help with that. It's just I don't want too much greenery. I want to support my root health. So the more root you have, and the happier and the healthier your roots are, the more upper biomass that can be supported, the less transplant shock these plants end up with. And in my experience, I've used the Miracle Grow, like the all-purpose Miracle Grow. I've done the fruit and vegetable Miracle Grow. I've tried organic forms of liquid fertilizer. This is the one I like. It's what I like and it's what I use. So you'll notice when you see the container that it's very high in phosphorus compared to the nitrogen and the potassium. And I don't like going for balance, because balance can actually cause an imbalance in what is taken up. But phosphorus being at the 15 is what I like. So the main thing that we know phosphorus can do for plants, particularly seedlings, is really affect the morphology of it. So that means it can affect the morphology of the roots, it can affect the morphology of the leaves, biomass accumulation, the morphology of the biomass just as a whole, and it also can aid and help with the process of photosynthesis. So that is why I personally use it. And the other thing is too, I can't believe I'm trying to justify myself, but I know I'm right. So I've seen this in the field. I've seen this fertilizer trials on, small scale research farms, obviously in an outdoor setting. It's not like in an indoor setting like this, but higher phos it makes a pretty big difference for seedlings. And the one that I had seen or that I was actually physically working on, was phosphate solubilizing bacteria is what we were working on at the time. And so we had our control, we had just high phosphorus fertilizer, and then we actually had phosphate solubilizing bacteria without phosphate, and then you get the idea. If you know science, you know exactly where that's going. So that is actually what we looked at, and the results were pretty shocking. And that convinced me. That convinced me that phosphorus is my friend, and that is what I'm using with my seedlings. Now, when everything goes outside, I do transition to something that's a little bit higher in nitrogen, because my soil is really high in phosphorus. Most soils are relatively high in phosphorus, unless you're doing like some crazy amounts of nutrient stuff, but nitrogen also usually is high. The problem is the bioavailable nitrogen tends to lack outdoors, and that is why I do bump it up with the nitrogen outside. Now I'm going to link a study down below. It goes really because I'm trying to find you guys stuff that's like everything, like it's pretty unbiased, just lists out the facts on everything to do with that topic. And I found one for phos that I personally think is pretty good at covering everything. There's one thing in there though. It says growth retardation and yield loss under low phos. Just, yeah, that's science. When we talk about lackluster growth, we do use that word. It's just what we use. So you will see that in that document. I mean nothing by it. They mean nothing by it. His literally just meant for a way to communicate. And is it the best way? No, but it's still there. And I can acknowledge that that is wrong. Now, the last thing that I really like to focus on is the water. So yes, I fertilize every time I do water. That is a fact. The other thing that I do is I actually will only water when the top layer is visibly dry. Yes, I know it sounds like you're gonna stress out your plant a lot, but it actually helps quite enormously. I don't let things dry out. I just wait till I can very obviously see kind of a dryness on the surface. Now, if you want to know more on exactly how I potted these tomatoes up, you're probably going to want to check out this video here. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.